Hello everyone, Joel Reed is my name from IVECO Trucks Australia, and welcome to the IVECO Eurocargo 4x4 familiarisation video. This video isn't intended to be a driver training video, however it's intended to highlight two specific features about this vehicle, one being the transmission and two being the off-road mobility features, i.e. diff locks, that we want to point out. Just a quick introduction into the vehicle. The IVECO Eurocargo ML150 4x4 is built in our factory in northern Italy. It's powered by a 6-litre turbo diesel engine that produces 280 horsepower and 950 newton meters of torque. Our firefighting division, Miguris, has specifically configured this vehicle to the CFA requirement. A crew cab has been fitted, 5 bucket seats, an internal roll bar, and the chassis layout to suit the bodybuilder. One thing I would like to highlight is this vehicle, to meet Euro 5 standards, requires AdBlue. AdBlue is a non-hazardous, non-toxic substance of water and urea that gets injected into the exhaust stream to reduce nitrous oxides. The AdBlue tank is 25 litres. On the cluster you can see how much AdBlue remains. To see the AdBlue, simply toggle through the menu on the cluster by pressing this button. And as you can see here, it's a bit over 50%. When refilling AdBlue, you need to treat it as a very clean operation. Please don't use any funnel with any residue of oil. AdBlue can be purchased from fuel stations which have now dedicated bowsers, or from a dedicated jerry can or 10-litre container. Just as a reminder, if filling from a dedicated AdBlue container, please be mindful of the expiry date. For further information about the operation of this vehicle, please refer to the user and maintenance manual. The vehicle is configured with a 6-speed automated manual transmission, or another way to describe it, it's a manual transmission with a computer that operates the gear selection and the shifts. It has two different modes. It's got an auto mode for on-road and normal driving, and it's also got a semi mode for more extreme off-road driving. What the semi mode means is that the driver has to select what gear they want to be in by pressing the shift lever, which we'll go through shortly. And the auto mode is similarly like an automatic car, it does its shifting for you. So it will optimize fuel consumption, so it will try to achieve the optimal torque point and will go into 6th gear at its earliest opportunity. So before we take off with the park brake still engaged, I press drive once and that puts it into auto mode, and that's what you can see on the cluster. Or if I wanted to do it in semi mode, I press drive again and you can see on the cluster semi mode. In a normal driving situation, I'm going to choose auto mode. Whilst in auto mode, the vehicle will optimise fuel consumption and do all your shifting for you. So we'll always try to remain within the green band. It's like driving a normal automatic vehicle. It will upshift and downshift for you. One thing to be mindful of an automated manual transmission, it can't quite see the road in front of you. So if you're about to approach quite an incline or a bit of a hill, you may want to maintain your momentum, drop a gear down. That can be done in two different ways. On the right hand stalk here, if I press it down towards the floor, it will drop down a gear, or via the throttle, I can press down even harder and there's a little indent button, it will also drop down a gear. So that's dropped me back a gear now. Or if I hit the throttle hard, it will also do the same effect. The vehicle is configured with an exhaust brake. On the right hand stalk you have two options. First option is the exhaust brake will engage when you hit the service brakes, when you put your foot on the brake. Or the second option, when the stalk's all the way back, is every time you take your foot off the throttle or you hit the brake, the exhaust brake comes on. However, be mindful, only ever engage the exhaust brake when your foot is off the throttle. If you're accelerating and you want the exhaust brake to come on, it will override the accelerator and it will apply the brakes to the vehicle. So only ever engage the exhaust brake when your foot is off the throttle. You can see by the cluster the flashing light to inform you that it is engaged. So one thing to be very mindful of with this transmission, it's an automated manual transmission. So if you're not asking the vehicle to accelerate or you're not asking the vehicle to have any engine braking, the clutch will disengage. So when you come up to a bit of an incline at a set of lights or a traffic intersection, or even when you're off-roading, remember to use your park brake. So that will prevent the vehicle from rolling back. So I've pulled up to an intersection now, the vehicle's still in gear, however, because I'm in a bit of an incline, I will roll back. So as I accelerate, I'll disengage the park brake at the same time. The vehicle also has cruise control. It's easily set by the toggles on the end of the right-hand stalk. By simply pressing the toggle, the cruise control is engaged. However, be mindful that the cruise control will not engage if the second setting on the exhaust brake is set. To cancel cruise control is simply by pressing the button here. Another great feature the vehicle has is a second speed limiter. Say for example, I'm sitting on 100 kilometers and I come into a country town at 80 kilometers, I start to slow down, I get to 80 kilometers, I simply press the second speed limiter button on the dash and it will limit the speed to 80 kilometers. So as hard as I press the throttle, it won't go any quicker than 80 kilometers. To disengage that, I either press the button again, or with the throttle, I do that indent. I press the throttle to the floor and hit the indent button, and it will disengage the second speed limiter. One great function of this transmission, it has slow mode. Slow mode is available in drive or in reverse. What slow mode allows, it limits the engine RPM and the amount of power to the vehicle, so it's only for very last maneuvering, typically reversing into a fire station. However, you need to be very mindful. In slow mode, it allows a bit of clutch slip, so it's definitely not for extended driving. It's not for driving when you're in an off-road environment, it's only for your last maneuver, say for example into a fire station. To engage slow mode, I simply press the drive button for 2 seconds, or if I was reversing, yes, I press reverse for 2 seconds. So to take off, I simply disengage the park brake and start my maneuver. And to get out of slow mode, simply press either the drive or reverse gear selection button. Okay, so going from an on-road driving environment, now we're heading to an off-road driving environment. What I'll do now to prepare the vehicle for this instance, I'm going to engage low range and center diff lock. Center diff lock will give me 50-50 split between the front and rear axles. Without the center diff lock engaged, in normal highway mode or on-road driving mode, I've got 30% torque to the front axle and 70% torque to the rear axle. But when going off-road, you want 50-50 split to help you get up the gradients. So to engage low range, I use this dial. Position 1 is in neutral, position 2 is in low range. Neutral, low range. To engage the center diff lock, I use this dial. Please be very mindful to only ever engage low range or out of low range or any of the diff locks when the vehicle is stationary. You may need to move the vehicle slowly so it engages and you'll see the lights on the cluster, but only ever when the vehicle is stationary. In this off-road environment, I choose the transmission to be in semi mode. This gives me full control of what gear I'm going to be in. In front of us is a bit of a descent. So what I'll do in semi mode, I'll keep the transmission in first gear, but also for the descent, I'll have the exhaust brake active on the second position to provide some additional retardation. So as we're descending, you need to be very mindful in semi mode, the vehicle will remain in first gear. So if you are going down quite a steep descent, you may need to put the foot on the brake slowly to slow the vehicle up, because you don't want to over rev the engine. Having the exhaust brake on each of these descents provides greater control to the vehicle. If you will find yourself in a situation where the vehicle is unable to move forward on a bit of a tricky ascent, you can easily do a stall start. So in this instance, we've actually stopped the vehicle on a significant incline. I've put my foot hard on the brake to stop the vehicle. However, what has happened at the same time, the clutch is disengaged. So I need to do a recovery. So what I'll do now is I'll put the vehicle into reverse and I'll take my foot slightly off the brake. So from the obstacle in front, it's going to be quite interesting. It's got uneven surface, but it's also then got a bit of a turn. So what I'm going to choose to do, I'm going to put the rear diff lock in. What the rear diff lock will do, it will provide equal torque to the rear axle. So we've already got our center diff lock engaged, so we've got equal torque to the front axle and rear axle. Now the rear wheels will be turning at the same speed. The reason I'm not choosing the front axle is because I would have to turn the vehicle around the corner. If I had the front axle diff lock engaged and it's got equal speed, I won't be able to turn the corner. Because as you can imagine, to turn a corner, one wheel's got to turn at a different speed than the other. So in this obstacle, center diff lock, low range, first gear, rear diff lock engaged. Alright, so from the obstacle in front now, I've got a bit of a tight turn and a bit of a descent. Because I'm going to go around this tight corner and there's a high traction surface, I'm going to disengage my center diff lock and my rear diff lock. The reason in doing so is I need to get around this tight corner, so I need my wheel speed to be different. If I left my diff locks engaged, I may cause mechanical damage. So now going down this little descent, I've got it in semi mode in second gear. However, I feel it's a bit fast as I've got my foot on the brake. But I get to a point And remember what I said earlier, it's a manual transmission and it will go back to first gear. So you might find instances, if you're going to get that slow, you may need to manually drop it back to first gear. I would just like to recap a couple of points. Remember, with the front diff lock engaged, the ABS will be disengaged, which is a feature of the vehicle, but be very mindful, you won't be able to steer the vehicle. Diff locks and the transfer box to only ever be engaged when the vehicle's stationary. And if you're driving in an off-road environment, choose semi-mode. In semi-mode, you can select what gear you want to be in. However, the vehicle will not want to stall. So if you're going down a steep descent in second gear in semi-mode and you slow the vehicle up significantly, it will drop back to first gear. So you need to be mindful, I am driving a manual transmission in those instances. So you will need to intervene with a gear change. Thank you for watching our familiarisation video. I hope you have learnt a lot about our new Eurocargo 4x4. For further information, please consult your CFA District Driver Educator. Thanks again for watching.